wheels of the plane screeched against the tarmac at Murtala Muhammad International Airport, but Kendall Idu barely noticed. Her mind was a whirlwind of memories and grief. She pressed her forehead against the window, staring blankly at the blur of taxiing planes and palm trees swaying in the dusty breeze. Nigeria. Home. It had been 2 long years since she left Lagos for Washington, D.C., not for a fresh start, but to fulfill the promise she made to the woman who raised her. After her parents died in a car crash when she was just 7, Kendall's grandmother, Mama Nain, became her entire world. It was Mama Nain who nurtured her, fed her, and ran the Rosewood Inn with pride. It was Mama Nain who made sacrifices so Kendall could go abroad and learn everything about hotel management, insisting that she would one day return to elevate their little inn into something grand. Every phone call from Lagos ended with the same words. "Everything is going well, my baby. Focus on your dreams." So Kendall had focused. She studied, worked internships, stayed up late crafting business plans she hoped would impress Mama Nain. But then, the phone rang one cold autumn morning in D.C., a neighbor's voice cracked with sorrow. Mama Nain had suffered a heart attack. It was too late. Just like that, the heartbeat of Kendall's life had gone silent. She had flown home immediately, using her last savings to buy a one-way ticket. For weeks, the world became a blur of black clothes, condolence visits, and silent sobs. Now, nearly a month later, she stood before the gates of Rosewood Inn, her palms trembling. This was it, her inheritance, her new purpose. But what she saw broke her. The once beautiful inn looked ghostly. The yellow paint was faded and cracked. The signboard leaned awkwardly on rusted nails, and the flower beds had dried up. Inside, the air was thick with dust and forgotten time. The front desk was buried beneath unopened letters and unpaid utility bills. The smile she hoped would greet her was replaced by silence. And then, a longtime staff member, Ejeoma, approached quietly, pressing a worn envelope into Kendall's hand. It was her grandmother's handwriting. Inside were receipts, bank loan agreements, debt notices, all stamped, all overdue. Mama Nain had been drowning, quietly borrowing more and more to keep the inn alive for Kendall's future, never once letting on. Kendall sank into the old wicker chair behind the desk, her chest tightening. Her grandmother had fought in silence. Now it was Kendall's turn. Tears streaked down her cheeks, but her jaw tightened with resolve. "You gave everything for this place, Grandma. I'm going to fight for it. I swear I won't let Rosewood die." The days after Kendall read through the debt papers felt like walking through a fog with no map. Every time she entered the old lobby of Rosewood Inn, the weight of the silence almost crushed her. The chandelier her grandmother used to polish weekly now hung slightly askew. The fountain in the courtyard had dried up. The inn that once welcomed diplomats, artists, and weary travelers now barely echoed her own footsteps. It was haunting, and worse, she didn't even know where to begin. She had always imagined her return to Lagos would be triumphant. She thought she'd come back with her degree in hand, full of ideas to expand the inn, modernize systems, and market to tourists and locals alike. She had envisioned her grandmother beaming with pride, the two of them working side by side to restore Rosewood's glory. But now, that future had crumbled before it even began. Kendall sat at her desk in the modest administrative block, staring at the chaos of files, unpaid invoices, and final warning notices. Desperation clawed at her chest, but she refused to cry again. She had already shed enough tears to fill the lagoon behind the inn. What she needed now was money. A miracle. Or both. With nothing to lose, she picked up her phone and began calling every contact she could think of. She visited banks, pitched proposals, emailed hotel chains, and even knocked on the doors of people who used to frequent the inn. Most of them gave polite but firm rejections. Too risky, no collateral, not in this economy. The others didn't even bother responding. But she didn't stop. She worked like a woman possessed. Morning to night, she sent out letters, typed out business plans, called investors, and pleaded with former guests who now worked in high places. The name Rosewood still carried a bit of prestige, but it wasn't enough. Each rejection was a slap, But Kendall kept going. She had to. There was no backup plan. Then, on a slow Saturday afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the dusty blinds of her office, Kendall's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but she picked up anyway, her voice weary but polite. "Hello? Good afternoon. Am I speaking with Miss Kendall Idu?" The voice was smooth, businesslike. "Yes, this is she," Kendall replied, sitting upright. "I'm calling on behalf of Royalgate Properties. You had reached out to us about a possible partnership or investment in Rosewood Inn." Kendall blinked. Royalgate Properties was one of the largest hotel-owning companies in Lagos, practically untouchable. She had sent them an email out of desperation, never actually expecting a response. "Yes, I did. I wasn't sure I'd hear back," she admitted cautiously. The caller continued. "Mr. Kendrick Lawal personally visited the premises this week. He was intrigued. However, he would only be interested under certain terms." Kendall's heart skipped. Kendrick Lawal? She had heard the name before. He was something of a legend in Lagos business circles, the golden boy of real estate. Billionaire. Brilliant. Ruthless. Known for transforming old spaces into luxury empires overnight. The mere mention of his name sent a chill down her spine. The caller didn't pause. He would require co-directorship of the inn and full authority to upscale and modernize it. That includes structural changes. No negotiations on that. The air in Kendall's lungs froze. Co-directorship? Authority? Changes? Tearing things down? The inn was her grandmother's legacy. Every beam, every brick, every carved frame on the guest room doors had history. Rebuilding it into some glossy hotel felt like sacrilege. But then again, she had no money. No offers, no backup. She needed help now. And maybe, just maybe, if she could talk to this Kendrick Lawal directly, she could convince him to help without changing everything. So with a shaky breath, she replied, "Tell him, I accept, but I'd like to meet him in person." She didn't know it yet, but that single yes would change everything. Her fight, her future, and her heart. By Saturday morning, Kendall was a woman on a mission. She had scheduled her official meeting with Royalgate Properties for Monday morning, and she was determined to ensure that when they arrived, Rosewood Inn would look like a place worthy of salvation, not demolition. Her entire weekend had been blocked off for cleaning, fixing, and preparing. She knew first impressions mattered, especially when the fate of a generational legacy was on the line. So, with only a handful of loyal staff left, Mama Ekeyet the cook, Bayo the handyman, and Uche the receptionist, Kendall led a cleaning rampage. They swept the floors, scrubbed walls, cleared the garden paths, repaired leaky taps, and mended broken fixtures. In the kitchen, she used her own savings to replace worn-out appliances. Plates were rewashed, curtains changed, and the dining hall was polished until the wooden tables gleamed again. Every cobweb was a threat, every dust particle, a potential deal-breaker. Kendall wasn't just trying to impress. She was fighting to preserve her family's name, her grandmother's memory, and her own purpose. By noon, sweat clung to her skin as she knelt in the overgrown garden, trimming hedges and uprooting weeds. Dirt clung to her palms, and the sun blazed down on her head. But she welcomed the heat. It matched the fire in her heart. She didn't notice the figure behind her until a low, amused voice sliced through the quiet. "Why is it so bushy in this garden? Looks like much attention hasn't been given to it." Startled, Kendall turned, strands of her curls falling into her eyes. A tall, sharply dressed man stood behind her, arms folded, gaze unimpressed. "And who said your opinion was needed?" she snapped, standing up. "I guess you have eyes. That's why we're fixing it." The stranger raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting her bluntness. "May I help you?" she asked. "I doubt it," he said dismissively, "unless you can tell me where to find the manager of this place." Something about his tone, cocky, detached, ignited her irritation. Still, she kept her composure. "Is there a problem? There are rooms available if you need one," she offered. He looked her up and down, his expression dripping with condescension. "Be a good girl. Run along and get me the manager. Tell him I'd like to see him. Kendall straightened to her full height, crossing her arms across her chest, her voice cool and clear. You're looking at her. The man paused, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face. You manage the inn? What, before school and on Saturdays? He asked, mockingly. I've been managing the inn since I was 5, she said, jaw set, alongside my grandmother, and now I do it on my own. That stopped him. He took a step back, his posture shifting. Kendall? He asked, surprise softening his expression. That's correct, she said firmly. He nodded slowly, his tone losing some of its arrogance. You look rather too young to carry all this on your shoulders. And yet here I am, she replied. What you see right now is someone who's had a hectic morning. It's not a reflection of how the inn will appear when the cleaning is done, mister. He gave her a tight smile. Kendrick Lawal. The name hit her like a hammer. Kendrick Lawal, the Kendrick Lawal. Her chest tightened. We weren't expecting you until Monday, she said, blinking. There's been a change of plans, he replied smoothly. I prefer to see properties when no one is expecting me. That's when you get the real picture. Kendall forced a polite smile. Well, welcome then. I'll require an office during my stay, he said, brushing invisible lint off his suit. She hesitated. We have limited office space, but you can use mine for a few days. I'll be staying for 2 weeks, he added curtly, and Kendall froze. 2 weeks? Yes, Kendrick replied, casually surveying the inn like he already owned it. I like to be fully immersed in any property I'm considering. I believe in understanding it from the inside out. 2 weeks. 2 whole weeks of sharing space with this rude, arrogant, uncultured man. Kendall clenched her fist behind her back and forced herself to smile again. If it means saving Rosewood, she told herself, then so be it. Let the games begin. The corridor was silent, save for the soft padding of their footsteps, as Kendall led Kendrick Lawal through the east wing of the inn toward her office. Her thoughts swirled like a whirlwind. She hadn't expected to meet him this soon, certainly not unannounced, and definitely not with him watching everything with a silent, judging gaze. She caught glimpses of him in the reflection of framed photos on the wall, his expensive shoes, the way he adjusted his designer wristwatch, the faint frown of disapproval on his otherwise handsome face. He wasn't just here for business. He was here to conquer. She could feel it. When they reached the modest office tucked at the end of the hallway, Kendall opened the door with a quiet pride. It wasn't much, but it was the heart of the inn's operations. A sturdy desk stacked with files and binders, shelves lined with guest ledgers dating back to the 1980s, a corkboard pinned with notes, reservation charts, and a faded photo of her grandmother in front of the inn during its opening week. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and lavender, a scent Mama Nene had insisted kept guests calm. Kendrick walked in slowly, his sharp eyes scanning the room. Do you manage the inn with the same tenacity you used to attack a garden? He asked suddenly, his voice quiet but direct. His eyes locked on hers with surprising intensity, like he was trying to see through her defenses. Kendall didn't flinch. She lifted her chin and replied coolly, Yes, and even more when it comes to running the business side. I assume you'd like to see the financial books this afternoon? I would, he answered, resting one hand lightly on the edge of her desk. I need to understand what I'm working with. Well, she said, her voice steady despite the heat in her chest. I'm sure you'll find everything in order. The inn runs smoothly, and as you already know, it turns a profit. A fair one. Kendrick gave a slight nod, lips twitching with something close to amusement. With a few changes, it could make a great deal more. Kendall stiffened. Changes? She asked, narrowing her eyes. I'd like to survey the property fully before making any final decisions, he said, brushing invisible dust from his designer shoes. But the location is excellent. Prime real estate. It's perfect for a resort. With the right upgrades, tennis courts, swimming pool, health spa, maybe even a small conference wing, we could turn this place into a top-tier destination. There's nothing wrong with the buildings, Mr. Kendrick, Kendall said sharply, stepping closer. This is not some lifeless resort built for Instagram photos and overpriced cocktails. It's a home. It serves home-cooked meals, offers quiet comfort, and feels like a hug when you walk through the door. That's why our guests come back year after year. And with modern amenities, Kendrick replied smoothly, you'd triple your clientele. You'd attract tourists, business retreats, wedding parties. People are hungry for comfort, but also luxury. She laughed bitterly. Keep your hot tubs and disco lounges for your other acquisitions, Mr. Lawal. This is Rosewood Inn, not a mini Vegas. My grandmother built this place with her bare hands. She planted the gardens herself, hosted guests like family, and created a sanctuary for people who didn't want the noise of the city. This is my inn, and it will remain just as she intended. He turned toward her slowly, his presence suddenly towering, filling the small room with tension. You're in? He asked, his tone quiet but loaded. Yes, she replied firmly, refusing to back down. He stepped closer. You may run the front desk and order fresh paint for the walls, Miss Idu, but I own the land. I hold the title deed. I hold the purse strings. If I decide to tear this entire place down and rebuild it from scratch, brick by brick, I can. Whatever alterations I make or don't make are my decisions. And mine alone, your role as manager does not entitle you to a vote. Kendall's fists clenched at her sides, but her voice didn't shake. And your role as owner doesn't entitle you to brains, Mr. Kendrick. Silence. For a moment, time stopped. Even the ceiling fan seemed to pause in mid-spin. Then, without waiting for a reply, Kendall turned on her heel, shoved the office door open, and stormed out, her heels clicking with the force of fury against the tiled floor. Outside, the sunlight hit her face like a slap, but she kept walking, past the reception desk, past the garden, past Mama Nini's photo smiling in the lobby. She didn't care if Kendrick Lawal saw her anger. She didn't care if he stayed the whole 2 weeks. This was her fight, and she would not go down quietly. Kendall slammed the door to her room with enough force to rattle the windows. She didn't care. The anger was bubbling just beneath her skin, threatening to explode again. She paced the floor like a caged lion, muttering to herself. Arrogant, interfering, insufferable man, she growled, yanking her hair into a messy bun. Why doesn't he go play Monopoly somewhere else, she hissed under her breath. Doesn't he have enough hotels to tinker with? Why this one? Why mine? There had to be hundreds of hotels under Royal Gate's empire. Ultra-modern ones with rooftop pools and robotic concierge services. Plus, didn't they own half the beach resorts in the country already? Why not open another fancy property in Victoria Island, or even Abuja or Enugu? Why come all the way here, to Rosewood Inn? The answer was bitter and clear. Because Rosewood was worth something. Still fuming, she kicked off her sandals and flopped onto her bed. Her fingers curled into the sheets her grandmother had hand-sewn. He's not touching a single brick, she muttered. I won't let him. Meanwhile, across the courtyard, Kendrick sat alone in the small administrative office that now doubled as his temporary command center. His posture was relaxed, but his mind was anything but. His fingers tapped against the desk as he replayed the earlier encounter in his head. That woman, small, fierce, and frustratingly proud, had just told him off like he was some errand boy trying to book a last-minute room. He wasn't used to that. Women in his world smiled politely, flirted carefully, and agreed quickly, especially when his money was involved. Kendall Idu had done none of those things. She had stared him down like he was an intruder in her home, insulted his intelligence, and then stormed out with her head held high like a queen whose crown no man could touch. He exhaled through his nose, amused despite himself. When he had first heard about the inn's financial problems, his interest was purely strategic. The location was prime, close to the Lekki Conservation Center, nestled between serene palm groves and a breezy lagoon. It was the perfect spot for a high-end boutique resort. He had imagined a stylish redesign, infinity pools, glass walkways, rooftop lounges with jazz on Friday nights, and when his team informed him that the inn had been running steadily for over 30 years, he assumed a seasoned older man was behind the operation. What he hadn't expected was Kendall. A woman, and a young one at that, fierce, fiery, and clearly loyal to the bone. And yet the inn had flourished under her care. Now he knew why the books looked clean, why the guest reviews were glowing, and why the business, despite its debts, still had a heartbeat. It wasn't just brick and mortar. It was personal to her. It was legacy. He leaned back in the chair and laced his fingers behind his head, staring at the faded photo of Mama Nene on the shelf. 3 decades of female leadership. No big headlines, no major investors. Just quiet excellence. It was surprising, almost admirable. But admiration didn't change facts. Because Kendrick Lawal hadn't come to Rosewood Inn to pick fights. He hadn't come to lose sleep over passionate managers or clingy traditions. He had come to make money. Lots and lots of it. And if he had to bulldoze the stubbornness out of Kendall Idu to get there, so be it. By Sunday morning, the heat of Kendall's anger had settled into something sharper resolve. No more arguments. No more slamming doors. If Kendrick Lawal wanted to assess her inn as some cold investment, she would let him, but on her terms. Rosewood wasn't just a building. It was a story, a spirit, and tonight she would bring that spirit to life. She stood in the middle of the front garden with her sleeves rolled, clipboard in hand, and fire in her eyes. "We're hosting a heritage dinner tonight," she announced to the remaining staff after breakfast. "Everyone is welcome. Locals, old guests, new visitors. We're not pitching a business. We're reminding people why they come back here." Mama Ekayet, who had cooked for the inn for over 25 years, nodded with a smile. "Time to bring out the big pots." "Exactly," Kendall grinned. "We'll make roasted plantains, coconut rice, goat meat stew, and your fisherman's soup. Uche, let's send out some quick text to old patrons. Call Uncle Ibuka with the talking drum. Bayo, those iron lanterns from storage? Clean and hang them. I want the garden glowing." The inn came alive with purpose. Staff moved like a revived army. Guests peeked curiously through the windows. By late afternoon, Rosewood had undergone a quiet transformation. Rows of string lights crisscrossed above the courtyard. Handmade Ankara napkins graced small wooden tables. Fragrant smoke from grilled fish and peppered suya danced through the air. Auntie Bisi arrived with her niece and brought fresh hibiscus flowers to scatter at the entryway. It wasn't fancy, but it was magical. Kendall changed into a flowy blue and yellow Ankara dress that once belonged to her grandmother. It cinched at the waist and flared at her hips, regal and warm. She wrapped her hair in a matching scarf and adorned her wrist with coral beads Mama Nene had worn on her 60th birthday. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, guests began to arrive. Some curious locals, a couple who had honeymooned at the inn 10 years earlier, a retired professor who had made Rosewood his annual escape. Children played around the garden paths. An old man told folk tales under a mango tree. Then came the music, the gentle rhythm of drums, flutes, and laughter. This wasn't just dinner. This was Rosewood's soul. From the office window, Kendrick looked up, distracted by the soft thrum of drums and rising voices outside. He stepped out onto the walkway and paused, caught off guard. It was beautiful. Not in the flashy, elite, high-rise way he was used to, but in a way that meant something. He saw joy, community, generations coming together in harmony. Elderly guests danced slowly under the lights. Children twirled with puff-puff in their hands, and the air pulsed with warmth. And then he saw her. Kendall, standing by the fire pit, handing out plates of jollof and grilled tilapia, her smile radiant and unguarded. The flickering light softened her features. She was laughing, freely, for the first time since his arrival. And for a moment, Kendrick forgot about projections, pool plans, and property values. He walked toward her slowly, the hum of the night wrapping around them like a song. Kendall noticed him and met him halfway, a plate in hand. Fisherman's soup, fried plantain, and Mama Ekayet's secret recipe coconut rice, she said, offering the tray with pride. He took it with a nod, his fingers brushing hers. "It's not a rooftop bar," she added, a teasing glint in her eye, "but it's the heartbeat of Rosewood." Kendrick studied her face for a second before answering. "Maybe this is a kind of luxury too." They stood in silence, the drum beats echoing in the background. Neither of them said it, but both felt it, the quiet shift in energy, like the first crack in a wall built too high, too fast. Kendrick hadn't meant to stay. His original plan was to observe from a distance, eat a polite portion of food, maybe nod in acknowledgement, and return to his room with mental notes on what to improve. But something about the laughter, the dancing, and the tangible soul of the evening pulled him in like a tide he couldn't resist. He found himself sitting at one of the communal tables beneath a mango tree wrapped in string lights, surrounded by guests who spoke of Rosewood like it was their second home. Auntie Bissy recounted how she'd celebrated her wedding anniversary here twice. A man in his late 60s described how Mama Nene had cooked pepper soup for him when he fell ill on a solo trip. Children played tag between tables, while a young local boy performed a poem about Lagos nights and village dreams. For once, Kendrick didn't feel like the billionaire in the room. He felt like a guest, welcomed into a memory that wasn't his, but one he respected nonetheless. Kendall, though still guarded, took notice. She watched him from across the garden. He laughed genuinely at a joke from the retired professor. He offered to help a little girl balance her plate. He didn't check his phone once. It surprised her. She had pegged him as one of those flashy men who measured moments by profits. But here he was, eating roasted yam with his fingers and complimenting the local zobo like it was imported wine. She felt her chest tighten, not with anger, but with something dangerously close to admiration. Later that night, as the event wound down and the crowd thinned, Kendall carried extra chairs into the storage room near the office. Her gown rustled softly in the quiet corridor. She was smiling to herself, just a little, until she paused by the partially open door of the office Kendrick was using. His voice floated through the gap, low and firm. Yes, the place has potential. I'm staying longer to assess what parts can be kept, but trust me, the charm is not enough. We'll need to rebrand, maybe rename. The garden's decent, but we can replace the central courtyard with a modern infinity pool. Conference halls and a rooftop deck would do wonders with the view. I'll have the design sent by the end of next week. And yes, she agreed to the co-directorship. She won't stand in the way too long. Kendall froze. Her hands slipped from the chair, and it clattered softly to the floor, but Kendrick didn't hear it. Her heart pounded so loudly it drowned out everything else. She won't stand in the way too long. Her vision blurred. She had been wrong, terribly wrong. She had let her guard fall just enough to believe he might see Rosewood for what it truly was, that the warmth and legacy would mean something to him, that maybe, just maybe, there was more to him than glass towers and concrete dreams. But no, this had been business all along. The hand she placed on the wall to steady herself trembled. She swallowed hard and stepped back from the door, her chest hollow, the soft glow of the evening now feeling like a cruel joke. She turned and walked away, the echo of her heels silent this time. Sleep was a distant stranger to Kendall that night. She tossed and turned beneath the soft cotton sheets in the room that once felt like a sanctuary. Shadows of the oil lanterns flickered against the ceiling, and the hum of the night wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. Her eyes burned, dry from unshed tears, and chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with fatigue. He was really going to destroy it. Rosewood. Her grandmother's legacy, her childhood home, her entire life. She remembered, clear as daylight, the day a businessman had once tried to do the same thing to Mama Nene. He had offered a flashy partnership, promising swimming pools and luxury cabins. Mama Nene had politely declined, and when he returned with papers, she'd stood at the gates and told him, "Rosewood Inn is not for sale. Not now, not ever." She had fought for this land like a lioness because it wasn't just a business to her. It was her dream. A simple, serene haven for weary souls. And now, years later, Kendall had not only failed to protect it, she had signed it away. The weight of that truth felt unbearable. At dawn, with puffy eyes and a shattered spirit, Kendall sat at the small writing desk in her room, the same one where her grandmother once wrote letters and balanced books. The walls were still lined with framed pictures of smiling guests and hand-painted art from local vendors. She reached for her laptop with trembling fingers and quietly typed her resignation. Simple, direct, final. I, Kendall Idu, hereby resign as manager of Rosewood Inn, effective immediately. Once it was printed and sealed in an envelope, She sat in silence for a moment, staring at the soft blue curtains swaying in the morning breeze. She had grown up in this house, the house Mama Nene had built behind the inn after selling their original family home just to keep the business alive. She had learned to walk in this compound, shared meals with her grandmother under the almond tree, and listened to stories of strength and sacrifice in this very room. This wasn't just where she worked, it was where she became. She showered and dressed quietly, slipping into a clean but simple blue lounge set. The kind of outfit you wear when you're trying to look composed but are barely holding it together. Her hair was pulled back into a neat bun, no makeup, no jewelry, just raw, stripped-down Kendall. She walked across the compound slowly, taking in every corner of the garden, the creaky porch swing, the fading sign above the lobby entrance. She burned it all into her memory. When she reached the office, her office, soon to be his, she didn't knock. Kendrick was seated behind her desk, dressed crisply in a white shirt and navy slacks, reviewing files with his usual air of focus and control. The sight of him in her space twisted something in her gut, but she swallowed the pain. Wordlessly, she walked in and placed the envelope on the desk. He looked up, one brow slightly raised. "I guess this is what you wanted," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "So I resign." Kendrick blinked, clearly taken aback. But she wasn't finished. "I tried to make you see reason. I tried to explain that this inn was perfect the way it is, that all it needed was a little funding, not a wrecking ball. But your gullible self wouldn't let you see past the dollar signs." Her chest rose and fell as she continued, her eyes blazing. "Since I'm leaving, I'll do you the pleasure of saying what I really think. You're a dictatorial, capitalistic opportunist. You've bought an inn that for generations has maintained its reputation for quality and personal service. And in order to make a few more annual dollars, you plan to turn it into a live-in amusement park." Her words hit the air like hammers, but she didn't stop. "In doing so, you'll not only destroy what this inn stands for, but you'll put out of work the very people who built it, some who've been here for over 30 years. And worse, you'll destroy the integrity of this community. This isn't some tourist attraction. This is a quiet, settled district where people breathe fresh air and enjoy peace, not where they come to splash in hot tubs or play tennis like they're at a resort in Lekki." Her voice cracked at the end, but she held her ground. Silence stretched. Kendrick leaned back slightly in the chair, his face unreadable. Then he said simply, "Are you finished?" That was it. Kendall stared at him with a look so cold, so full of hurt and betrayal. It could have frozen the room. Without a word, she turned and dashed out of the office, the hot sting of tears finally breaking through. As the door slammed behind her, Kendrick remained still, the resignation letter sitting untouched between them. He had won. So why did it feel like he'd just lost something far more important? Kendrick couldn't sleep. The night air inside his room was thick, clinging to his skin like guilt, like regret. He sat at the edge of the bed, his head buried in his hands, the dim bedside lamp casting long shadows across the floor. Kendall's voice still echoed in his mind, sharp and raw and unforgiving. Her words had cut deep because they were true. He had come to Rosewood to do what he always did: buy, reshape, profit. That was his rhythm, his talent, his reputation. But tonight, all of it felt wrong, like desecrating something sacred. He had seen something rare in her eyes earlier, something that haunted him now. Loss, love, loyalty. Her resignation, her finality, her broken voice. It shook him. It changed him. Feeling suffocated, Kendrick rose from the bed, grabbed his hoodie from the chair, and stepped out into the cool night air. The inn was quiet, the last of the garden lanterns glowing faintly like dying stars. He walked instinctively toward the almond tree, needing silence, clarity. But then he saw her. Kendall sat on the swing, her back to him, shoulders hunched. Her long hair hung loose, blowing slightly in the breeze. The fabric of her soft loungewear clung to her in the moonlight. But it wasn't her appearance that made his chest ache. It was the sound. She was crying, softly at first, then louder, words tumbling out between broken sobs. "I'm sorry, Mama. Daddy. Grandma." Her voice cracked, and Kendrick's breath caught. "I tried. I tried to save it. I gave everything. My savings, my pride. But I wasn't strong enough. I let you down. I let myself down." Kendrick stood, frozen under the shadows, something unfamiliar burning in his chest. And before he could stop himself, he moved, like gravity pulled him to her. He stood behind the swing and silently, gently, wrapped his arms around her from behind. She stiffened, startled, but then she melted. Kendall leaned into his chest and sobbed, her fingers curling over his arms, needing to be held, needing to break somewhere that was safe. Kendrick closed his eyes and held her tighter. He didn't speak. There were no words that would suffice. He just let her cry, let her grief pour out onto his shoulder. Her pain wrapped around him like a second skin. Minutes passed like that. Then, slowly, she turned in his arms. Her face was red and wet, but her eyes met his with a clarity that stilled him. She didn't pull away. She only whispered, "Please, Kendrick, don't take away the only thing that makes me feel close to my family. This inn is all I have left of them. Please." His hand cupped her face. Her skin was soft and damp with tears. And right there, under the watchful eyes of the stars, he did the one thing he'd craved for weeks. He kissed her. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't polite. It was hungry, aching, honest. He kissed her like she was his oxygen, like he needed her lips to stay alive. And Kendall? She didn't fight it. She had wanted this since the day he stood arrogantly in her garden, eyes full of judgment and jaw carved by the gods. He was rude, infuriating, controlling. But he was also magnetic, strong, real, and her heart had betrayed her from the start. The kiss deepened. Her hands found his shirt, clutching it like a lifeline. His tongue tasted her tears, her surrender, her fire. It wasn't just desire. It was everything. And she gave it all back. Without a word, he scooped her into his arms, and she clung to him. He carried her across the courtyard, past the garden, into his room, where moonlight spilled across the bed in soft streaks. He laid her down gently, reverently. Hovering over her, he brushed a damp curl from her forehead. "Kendall," he whispered, voice trembling. "Tell me to stop." But she didn't. She just reached for him again. He kissed her lips, then her throat, then lower, tracing every inch of her like he was memorizing her soul. Her moans were soft, her hands eager, and her heart wide open. She let him in. And Kendrick, who had never believed in fate, knew in that moment that she wasn't just someone he wanted. She was someone he needed. He claimed her body, but more than that, he surrendered his own, to her strength, her defiance, her softness, her legacy. And when it was over, when they lay tangled in breathless silence, he stared at her in the moonlight and knew he wanted her. Tonight and always. Sunlight filtered softly through the sheer curtains, casting golden hues across the quiet room. The air smelled like jasmine and warmth, and in that perfect silence, Kendall stirred. Her lashes fluttered open slowly, and for a moment she wasn't sure if the night before had been a dream. But then she felt the arm wrapped around her waist, the steady breath behind her, the way their bodies still fit together like the end of a sentence meant just for her. "Kendrick." He shifted slightly, brushing his lips against her shoulder. "Good morning," he murmured. Kendall didn't reply at first. She just lay there listening to the quiet thump of her own heart. So much had happened, so quickly. And yet, she felt peace. Real, full peace for the first time in weeks. Kendrick sat up, resting against the headboard. He looked at her, his eyes serious but soft. "I need to say something," he began. She turned to him, sheets clutched to her chest, heart racing. "The first day I saw you," he said quietly, "you were standing in the garden, your hands in the dirt, fury in your eyes. daring anyone to question your right to defend this place. And I swear, he paused, chuckling under his breath, I've never been so challenged and so drawn to someone at the same time. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. I'm sorry for last night, he said. Not for kissing you, not for making love to you. That was unforgettable. But for letting it happen without giving you clarity, without slowing down. Everything moves so fast, but Kendall, I wouldn't change a second of it, and I want to do it again. For as long as you'll let me. Kendall's heart stopped. Her lips parted, but she couldn't speak just yet. He watched her, searching her eyes. I know it all happened so fast, he continued, and I know I don't deserve how easily you let me in. But I need you to know, I'm not going to tear down the inn anymore. Kendall blinked. What? He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I finally understand what this place means to you, what it meant to your grandmother. This isn't just a building, it's your heart, and I don't want to break it. So yes, I'll still invest. I'll still be a director. But you will run the show. Kendall's lips trembled. You're serious? I'm dead serious, he said. Rosewood Inn will stay standing, just the way it is, with the charm, the heart, the garden swing, and the woman who gave it life. She threw her arms around him, burying her face in his neck. Thank you, she whispered. Oh my God, thank you. I don't know what to say. He pulled her back just enough to look her in the eye. Say yes. To what? She whispered. In the process of multiplying my empire, I stumbled across the most determined, passionate, hard-headed woman I've ever met, and I'd give up everything to keep her. He exhaled slowly. Go on a date with me. Be with me. Let me really choose you, not just for tonight, but for tomorrow, and every day after that. Kendall's jaw dropped. Then, like a flash of light, she jumped out of bed, wrapping herself in the sheet, her face glowing with laughter and disbelief. Yes, she laughed breathlessly. Yes to the date. Yes to everything. Yes to you. He watched her, grinning like a man who had just conquered the world. And thank you, she added, her voice suddenly softer, eyes shimmering, for not just taking me and walking away, for staying, for wanting all of me. He stood and wrapped his arms around her again, pulling her close. Trust me, he whispered against her lips. I want nothing less than all of you. And as they stood there, in the middle of that quiet room, surrounded by light and laughter and new beginnings, they both knew this wasn't the end of a battle. It was the beginning of something extraordinary. The afternoon passed like a dream. After their morning of confessions, stolen kisses, and joyful promises, Kendall spent the rest of the day fluttering between disbelief and anticipation. She kept replaying Kendrick's words in her mind. Go on a date with me. Let me really choose you. It was more than an invitation. It was a promise, one she never thought she'd hear from a man like him. By evening, Rosewood Inn was glowing with soft lanterns, as it always did, but tonight felt different. Tonight, there was magic in the air. Kendall stood in front of her mirror in her old room, the one she had grown up in, now polished with quiet elegance. She had slipped into a flowy ivory dress with subtle gold embroidery that hugged her waist and fell in soft waves past her knees. Her natural curls framed her face perfectly, and a thin gold chain danced along her collarbone. She wasn't aiming for extravagance. She was aiming for her authentic, calm, classic. Across the courtyard, Kendrick had traded his sharp suits for a more relaxed cream caftan that clung to his frame in all the right ways. He looked powerful, but not intimidating. Elegant, but comfortable. And when he saw her walking toward him, lantern light flickering on her skin, his breath caught. You look, he trailed off, eyes locked on her. Like the moon walked down from the sky and decided to stay here with me. Kendall laughed, cheeks warm. You really should have gone into poetry instead of real estate. And you, he replied, offering his hand, should have come into my life sooner. They strolled out of the inn gates into the quiet stretch of Lecky's waterfront, just 10 minutes away. Kendrick had arranged a private dinner by the lagoon, with woven lanterns hanging from palm trees, a low round table with silk cushions, and a spread of Nigerian fusion dishes served on handcrafted ceramic trays. The sound of water lapping gently against the rocks filled the silence between them as they sat. There was no music, only the symphony of waves, wind, and their own laughter. He poured her a glass of Zobo wine with mint and ginger, watching her face closely. "I meant what I said this morning," Kendrick began, "about Rosewood. I'll protect it now. With you. And I meant everything else too." Kendall's heart skipped. "Even the part about wanting all of me?" He smiled slowly, leaning closer. "Especially that part." She looked down, bashful. "I didn't expect you to stay. Not after last night. I thought once you had me, you'd walk away." Kendrick reached across the table and took her hand in his. "I didn't stay because I felt guilty, Kendall. I stayed because I was already falling for you, and I just hadn't admitted it yet. You're unlike anyone I've ever met. You challenge me. You humble me. And I don't want a future where you're not in it." Kendall blinked fast, swallowing the lump in her throat. "You have no idea how long I've waited to hear something like that." He stood and walked to her side, pulling her gently to her feet. "So let me say it clearly." He wrapped his arms around her waist, their bodies perfectly aligned. "I want you, Kendall Idu. Not just tonight, not just for this project, but for every day after. Be mine." The night breeze blew gently through her curls, but nothing compared to the warmth blooming inside her chest. She rose on her toes, cupped his cheek, and whispered, "I already am." And there, under the palm trees in the moonlit sky, with the scent of jasmine in the air and the sound of home all around them, they kissed again. Not as enemies, not as business partners, but as two people, finally choosing love. The days that followed were unlike anything Kendall could have imagined. Gone were the shadows of doubt, the heaviness of impending loss, and the constant ache of fighting alone. With Kendrick by her side, and now fully invested in every way, Rosewood Inn didn't just survive. It thrived. Word spread quickly. Not just about the man who once came to tear the inn down, but chose to build it up instead, but also about the powerful woman who stood her ground and ended up transforming her legacy into a legend. The staff noticed first. Mama Iket started humming again in the mornings. Bayo, the handyman, walked straighter, proud of the new maintenance equipment Kendrick had provided. Uche at the front desk began wearing brighter colors and greeting guests with fresh confidence. The entire inn pulsed with a new rhythm, a gentle, hopeful energy that wrapped around everyone like sunlight. With Kendrick's backing, they didn't change Rosewood's essence. No, they enhanced it. New guest rooms were refurbished with tasteful elegance, blending the inn's original charm with quiet luxury. Handmade furniture replaced worn-out pieces, carefully sourced art from local talents adorned the halls, and a small reading lounge was added in honor of Mama Neen. The garden was now lit with solar lanterns. The once dry fountain flowed again, and a tranquil yoga and tea deck overlooked the lagoon. Guests poured in. Tourists from abroad, Nigerians looking for calm in the chaos, old patrons who returned to see the miracle for themselves. Kendall worked tirelessly, closing deals, managing bookings, refining menus, curating experiences. She was now not just the manager, but the heartbeat of an establishment that people respected and adored. And Kendrick, he watched her bloom with a kind of pride that went deeper than any business victory he'd ever known. He sat one morning by the outdoor cafe, his laptop open but ignored, as he observed Kendall in her element, confidently walking a potential event planner through the property, her voice graceful, her presence commanding. She wore a white blazer over an Ankara print jumpsuit, her heels clicking purposefully against the stone path. Her hair was tied up in a silk scarf, her lips painted a quiet rose, her eyes focused but full of light. She was unstoppable. "She's a force to reckon with," a guest nearby whispered to her companion. Kendrick smiled. She's mine. Later that evening, as the day wound down and the garden lanterns lit the dusk, Kendall joined him at their favorite bench under the almond tree. We confirmed 2 wedding packages and 3-week-long retreat bookings today, she said, slipping off her heels with a sigh of contentment. You're becoming a business shark, Kendrick teased, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. I learn from the best, she said, nuzzling into him. He looked at her, his voice soft. You were always the best, Kendall. I just helped you shine brighter. She turned to him and smiled. And you? You came here to tear it all down. And now look at you. You've helped build something more beautiful than I ever dreamed. Kendrick looked around the inn, now glowing like a jewel under the moonlight. This place changed me, Kendall. You changed me. And I've never been prouder of anything than I am of us and what we've created. They held each other in silence, the hum of laughter and life around them, the legacy of generations rooted beneath their feet. Rosewood Inn had risen from the brink, not just restored, but reborn. And so had they. The sun rose on Rosewood Inn like it was bowing to royalty. A crisp gold and ivory banner fluttered above the garden gates, reading, Congratulations, Rosewood Inn winner of the Lagos Heritage Hospitality Award. It was official. After months of restoration, hard work, and unwavering passion, the very inn that had almost been forgotten was now the most talked about destination in Lagos. The award presented by the Lagos Tourism and Culture Board recognized not only the inn's cultural preservation, but also its modern impact and unique charm. Rosewood had become the perfect blend of past and present. The entire garden buzzed with life that afternoon. Journalists moved from corner to corner, taking photos of guests sipping on hibiscus cocktails. Well-known chefs, culture critics, and tourism directors mingled with locals and longtime patrons who had known Mama Nene personally. The staff wore matching traditional attires. Kendall wore a regal emerald green lace dress with sheer sleeves, her hair wrapped high with coral beads, cascading down her ears and neck. She was the picture of grace, a queen on her throne. Kendrick stood beside her, in a cream agbada embroidered with gold thread, watching as she gave a heartfelt speech thanking the community, the staff, and her grandmother. My granny always said this place wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was love. It was legacy. It was laughter and healing and hope. I only wish she were here to see this. But I believe she is, and that she's smiling. The crowd clapped. Some wept. That night, as the lights dimmed and the guests left with full hearts and fuller memories, Kendall remained in the garden, staring up at the sky filled with stars. She didn't hear Kendrick approach until he was standing behind her, holding something in his hand. Kendall, he said softly, his voice already trembling. She turned, and the sight of him, barefoot now, shirt sleeves rolled, holding a tiny velvet box, made her heart stop. Kendrick, she breathed. He went down on one knee beneath the very almond tree where he'd first held her in silence, where her tears had turned into the first pages of their love story. I came to Rosewood for profit, he said, but I found you instead. I found purpose. I found peace. I found everything I didn't know I needed. Tears welled in her eyes. Keep building this with you. This inn, this life, this love. Kendall Idu, will you marry me? Kendall gasped, hands trembling over her lips. Yes, she cried out, voice cracking with joy. Yes, Kendrick, yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, a delicate gold band with a single emerald stone, the color of growth, legacy, and everything Rosewood stood for. As he stood and pulled her into his arms, the garden around them burst with life. Staff cheering from the windows, soft fireworks lighting up the sky, the scent of hibiscus and fried plantain floating on the air. Kendall leaned her head against his chest, smiling through happy tears. They did it. She did it. And somewhere in the breeze, she felt it, like her parents and her grandmother were right there watching with pride. This was more than a love story. This was home. No,